Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this 38th Legislative District Virtual Town Hall with your state legislators, Senator June Robinson and Representatives Emily Wicks and Mike Sells. The 38th Legislative District covers part of Snohomish County, including Everett, Marysville, and Toledo. My name is Lily, and I'll be moderating the event. Thank you for taking the time to join us. So let's get started. Here are your legislators with some opening remarks. Senator, you go first. Okay, we may be experiencing technical difficulties. So let's start with Representative Wicks.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hi there. My name is Emily Wicks. Born and raised in Marysville, Washington, and I currently live in North Everett. I currently serve as the Vice Chair of the Commerce and Gaming Committee, on the Transportation Committee, and on Children, Youth, and Families. I'm very excited to be here and happy to answer questions and hear about some priorities.
All right, Representative Sells.
Thank you very much for introducing us, Lilia. I'm Representative Mike Sells, 38th Legislative District. I am the chair of the House Labor Committee, sit on the Capital Budget Committee, and the College and Workforce Development Committee.
All right, so while we're still figuring out how to get Senator Robinson here, Representative Sells, do you want to talk a little bit about the unemployment insurance bill that just was signed by the governor the other day?
Well, we just passed a large bill, about $1.7 billion, passed through a lot of it from federal money to enhance benefits and continue them, keep them going during the session. And part of that bill was also to take a long, hard look at the system itself to try to improve efficiencies. I think most of us know that the system was not set up to work during a pandemic like this, and it needs a lot of changes.
All right, I think we have Senator June Robinson back. Is she there, Senator?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me now? Yeah,
yep.
Okay. Nice to see everyone. I'm Senator June Robinson. Happy to serve in the Senate this year following the retirement of Senator John McCoy after serving 7 years in the State House. So I'm new to the Senate, but not new to the legislature or serving the people of the 38th District. I sit on the Labor and Commerce Committee, the Healthcare and Long-Term Care Committee, and Vice Chair of the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate.
All right, so there were several ways that we collected questions for this event, and there are people online who are also submitting questions. This first one is from Rhonda, and it came via SurveyMonkey. And let's see, I'm going to read it to you. What are your priorities, and how do we keep you accountable?
Well, I'll go ahead and start if that's all right. Thank you for this question, Rhonda. My big priorities are supporting our local governments, resilience and recovery, and addressing our childcare crisis that existed before. And, you know, for me, keeping me accountable is making sure you're contacting me and letting me know what your priorities are, and staying in touch, and as well as, you know, I think good government is about, you know, is a game of addition, not subtraction. So any way that I can, you know, welcome you into the work that I'm doing, I would love to welcome that opportunity. I know that people are really busy, and it's hard to, you know, pay attention to everything that's going on, but I hope that I can be communicating with you and letting you know where I stand. And that's going to be really critical. I also heard a great tip from somebody that, you know, you can't just pass bills and work on legislation. There's a lot of work that goes on in the interim to make sure that your bills are having the necessary intent that you want. And so that was some great advice given to me, that following through on my legislation and making sure that it's it's carrying out what it's expected to do, and is really important. So I look forward to being able to update people on that in their interim as well, and let people know the success or where it needs to be addressed. So thanks for that question.
And I think all of us have the priority of just making sure that our state is on track to recover both from the public health pandemic as well as the economic crisis that we're facing right now. So the bills that we've already passed are our first step in doing that, both the unemployment bill that we spoke to, as well as the appropriations bill, where we appropriated federal funds out into our communities for immediate relief for some of our businesses, as well as individuals who are really struggling right now. And that will be the theme of this legislative session going forward, making sure our schools have the resources that they need in order to safely reopen for teachers and staff and students to come back, making sure our public health system is adequately funded so that we can continue to really address the pandemic and roll out vaccines, making sure that our small businesses have the support so that they can stay alive and continue to provide jobs in our communities. So those are just some of my priorities. And I think, like Emily said, the way to hold us accountable is to stay in touch, to make sure you tell us when we're not being accountable, as well as when we are. And that can be done through phone calls, emails, by reading our, we all send out newsletters, by events like this. There are many ways that you can engage with us in our offices and just let us know how we're doing.
Representative Sells, you want to add anything?
I would just simply agree with Senator Robinson and Representative Wicks. We need to be focused in on how we get through this COVID-19, making sure we can get the Employment Security Department up to date and up to the kind of staffing that people can get the help they need. Those are going to be the areas that I'm focused on in this session.
All right. Hey, for those of you on Facebook, remember that you can leave a question in the comments section and I will get it over here on my end. Next question is from Pamela and it came via email. I'm going to read it to you. Access to the internet should be a right because we need it for everything we do these days. What's happening with the bills? Sorry, what's happening with the bills to make sure we have universal broadband so people can go to school and work?
Well, actually, I just stepped into this town hall from the Ways and Means Committee, and we heard a bill today in that committee that would allocate funding, state funding to, we do have an Office of Broadband in the Department of Commerce at the state, and a lot of their job is just what you are asking, you know, how do we can make sure that everyone in rural and urban areas around our state have access to broadband and to the internet. So that bill will, if it passes, will help by allocating state funding so that they can then in turn match that and get federal grants. This is going to be a big area of focus. We all see how incredibly important internet access is right now, not only for students to be able to do their schoolwork, but for seniors to be able to access healthcare, job search. You know, there's just so many different reasons why our citizens, as you say, deserve and need access to high quality and affordable internet.
All right, our next question came via email. It is from James. And folks, if you're watching on Facebook, leave a comment or a question in the comment section. James asks, well, he says, do you support the bills to address police reform and deadly force? Can you talk about which ones you most support?
I could go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Emily.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely support a lot of the police accountability bills that are coming forward. You know, our law enforcement officers hold state-sanctioned power over life and death, and they should be held to the highest standards. when someone is shot or killed by police and the law doesn't offer pathways to clear justice for the victim, it damages the community, the reputation of law enforcement, and the notion of justice. And so, we've seen time and time again that unnecessary police violence and a lack of accountability for that violence has led a lot of our community members to lose trust in law enforcement. So, I know a lot of the bills are working on setting expectations and creating transparency and building systems of accountability. There's bills like 1310, which requires that de-escalation be an officer's first instinct, and that deadly force is truly the last resort. It sets a baseline for acceptable tactics and helps them guide them. I also think, creating transparency is really critical. I think 1203, which allows communities to have the ability to review policies and discipline processes, are really important. And 1092 and in the Senate 5290 or 59, sorry, which help ensure that when force is deployed, we get an accurate picture of when that happened. Right now, the community, again, doesn't, trust law enforcement to investigate itself properly. So there's a couple of other bills that I'm looking at. 1267 creates a statewide office of independent investigations to ensure that that's being used. And there's also legislation, and I can't remember all of the bill numbers, but really talks about, empowering good officers who have stepped in to protect and serve to be able to report to their supervisors when they see things that are going wrong. And so I think that really empowers people to do the right thing. So we're working with law enforcement, we're working with lots of stakeholders, and I've been very impressed with the group of legislators and the task force that has come together to have all of these conversations during the interim. And I look forward to hearing more from folks on this and really working with our police and our law enforcement partners to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe. Thank you for that question.
All right, thank you. And I see that we have some questions coming in through Facebook, but I had already queued up Francis, and we got this one through email, so I'm going to read this one first. What is being done to make sure everyone can get vaccines? Why aren't we vaccinating more teachers so that kids can go back to school?
Well, everyone is frustrated about the vaccine supply now. And it is really just that it's a problem with supply. This is a new vaccine, one that it's technology that we haven't used before in vaccines. So the manufacturers are having trouble ramping up production. Remember, we're trying to vaccinate the entire country and actually the entire world all at the same time. So we've never done anything like this in our history before. So it is very frustrating, and I'm confident that as time goes on, hopefully in the next month or so, the supply will get better. It'll get more regular and predictable, so that our doctor's offices, pharmacies, the county, Snohomish County has set up drive-through vaccination sites. All of those are ready to go if we just have a supply of vaccines. So I'm sure that will get better as it goes along. I want to give a shout out to the Tulalip tribes who get vaccine supply directly through the Indian Health Service. And because of that avenue, they were able to offer vaccinations to the teachers in the Marysville School District through that channel. And hopefully that'll enable that school district to go back to school earlier.
Okay, so we're going to go with our first live question. This one is from Doug, and he says, there are a few bills and initiatives for universal health care in Washington state. What are the barriers to passing or implementing a universal or a similar healthcare model here in Washington? Also, all three of you are amazing. Thank you for what you do. Oh, that's sweet.
I feel like I want to give Representative Sells a chance to answer a question since I cut him off before.
Well, I think there's probably a will on the part of a lot of legislators, but probably not the will of the total legislature at this point in time. There's the whole issue of what it would take to do that, the costs of doing that. To me, it makes a lot of sense, but I'm not seeing any moves anytime soon in that direction, especially and the national level, where you're seeing people pushing back in the opposite direction. So a bit of a frustration, but it's a matter of, I think, time and political will.
It's really challenging for states to go on their own to create sort of a single payer healthcare system. Many states, not many, but the states who have taken a really serious look at that and modeled it out have just realized that they'd have to raise taxes so much in order to pay for it. It really needs to be a federal initiative. In the meantime, we keep expanding access to healthcare options here in the state. I realize it's not enough. We need to keep pushing. But this year we do have a bill, for example, that would extend Medicaid for 12 months postpartum for when a woman has a newborn. So things like that we can do that just provide more access to affordable health care for people. And eventually we will get there. I know that's not the answer that we all want, but unfortunately, that's sort of the clunky system that we're stuck with for now.
I think Senator Robinson didn't add in other things that we do, like paid family and medical leave, which she championed through the House of Representatives, got passed several years ago. It's a piece of the medical thing that people can take some time off without losing pay to take care of their family members when they're not well. Again, it's sort of piecemeal, like she said, in doing those things, but it's going to take something at the federal level, I think, to implement it the best way possible.
All right. We have another question that came in through email. This one is from Mason, and he says, "It is not fair that working people like me should pay more of my income in taxes than the richest people. When are we going to fix our tax system so that it doesn't punish the people who have the least?"
Thank you, Mason, for that question. And I hear you. Right now, the state's wealthiest households actually spend about 3% of their income on taxes, while in contrast, the poorest families are spending about 18%. It's a far larger gap than any state. And so I definitely hear that. And that's something that we're working on. I think, an economist that I heard one time said it perfectly, that the fact that the lowest income families have to work 9.2 weeks out of the year just to pay their tax bill, and the top 1% only have to pay 1.6 weeks out of the year is absolutely shameful. And so we're working on a wealth tax, and it actually should be called a billionaire tax, because that's what it is. It's a 1% tax on billionaires that only pops in after the first billion. So I think that's a really key thing that we're working on this year. And I'm supportive of a capital gains tax as well. This is one of the things that we need to be taking. That money needs to go back into the community and support people. And I think people will be really surprised at how few people that it actually affects. But it will make a meaningful difference in some of the things we're working on, like the Fair Start for Kids Act, which invests in childcare. So we'll continue to do this. We know we need to change our tax system and make it more equitable and fair for people. And we're going to keep working on that. And I really appreciate the question. And I just so appreciate you bringing that to light for everyone that we're talking to.
All right. Next question is from Randy. And Randy asks, "Please discuss your views on both gas tax by mile and electric vehicles by 2030.
Do y'all want me to pop in on that?
I was looking at Mike. I don't know if he wants to answer that.
Go for it, Mike. I'll pop in if there's anything to add.
Emily, you sit on the Transportation Committee, so I thought maybe that was you, but I can tell you my views on both the gas tax by mile and electric vehicles. I would prefer that we had less taxes, period. But the reality is gas tax is currently going down because, ironically, people are using less gas. But that means maintenance and things that need to be done on the roads are not getting done. So you got to figure out a way to make sure that we're taxing by the mile. While it may not be popular, is the kind of thing that's sort of a user tax, where you pay attention to how much use of the road you have, and you are taxed in that sense. I get frustrated a little bit with the electric vehicle taxes. On the other hand, roads are paid for traditionally by gas taxes. And if you have an electric vehicle, you're not paying anything in terms of gas taxes usually. So in the past, the Transportation Committee and the House and the Senate have voted to increase the electric vehicle fees to offset some of that cost. I think it personally a little bit higher than it should be owning a hybrid vehicle, but I understand the reason behind it. Somewhere you're going to have to change the tax system financing for transportation to take into account the realities of how we've changed in our transportation expectations.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. Thank you, Representative Sells. That really summarizes it. I just didn't want to talk too much, but the Transportation Committee had conducted nearly 90 listening sessions across Washington State in the interim, reaching out to stakeholders in transportation and then those previously not engaged in transportation policy, but where transportation policy would really affect them. And we came up with the priorities. It's maintenance and preservation. We have a backlog of maintenance and preservation projects that we need to address. Investing in frontline communities, supporting economic recovery, of course, and pursuing an aggressive carbon reduction, and just living up to our commitments, especially those that were made in the Connecting Washington transportation package a number of years ago. It also is about including the restoration of our fish passages and the culverts. That's not only a moral obligation that we have, that's also a legal obligation that we have, and in doing that will do some amazing things for our salmon. And so, this package that the House Democrats have brought forward raises revenue without new bonding, which is what we heard. People didn't want to bond new revenue. It's $26 billion over the next 16 years. And yes, it increases the fuel tax by 18 cents in the first biennium. But what's really interesting to note is that if you have a vehicle that's getting 20 to 25 miles a gallon, which reaches into the small trucks, it's still less than 1 cent per mile. And we kind of need to, this isn't going to be the long-term solution, as our gas taxes have been going down for years as people are changing their dynamics and their work culture, and that's happening. So we're going to have to look at things like road usage charge and make things more equitable, and also incentivize people to get electric vehicles. I heard the other day, which was really interesting, that the timeline for when electric vehicles become cheaper than vehicles using fuel, it just continues to get closer and closer. And now they're talking about it being next year, 2022. So we need to kind of change that, as Representative Sells talked about. But there's a lot of other great things in this package, and we need to invest in some of these projects. And we're looking at, with the Department of Transportation, maintenance and preservation projects that we need to work on. Here we have Highway 2. We have such critical projects that need to be addressed. 529, I know that the ability for Marysville residents that are coming and trying to get on I-5, not having to go over the train tracks there is really important to quality of life and moving people and reducing congestion. So I see the great long-term and short-term benefits of continuing to move these projects forward. And I'll finish with that because there's so much I can talk about with transportation, and happy to answer questions via email in the future.
Okay, so we have a lot of people and we have a lot of questions, so let's keep going. Preston has a question. Do you believe there should be change at Employment Security Department?
Yes. I mean, that's the easy answer to it. The question becomes, what kind of change? When this pandemic started, it hit overnight. And one of the things I said on the House floor when we passed the bill increasing benefits and doing some of those other things was, unlike a recession that you saw on a chart, it was like a bell-shaped curve. In terms of a COVID, if you look at a chart, it was a spike. And what really came home to me was a system that was designed to take in 500 calls a day suddenly had 26,000, and it was not meant to be able to deal with something like that. That meant that they were going to have to either hire a lot more people, find a lot more people, and they've started doing that and working on it to change the system and make it so people can get through. But beyond that, we're going to have to plan for future pandemics or future types of situations, so people can get through. They can expect to get things resolved in a timely manner. The other thing that probably needs changing is the way they communicate with people. I've looked at some of the letters that have come out to people explaining or not explaining their benefits, and I'm appalled. So we've put together a bill asking for some changes down the road. I think the Employment Security Department has heard from at least my committee in work sessions that people are not very happy. But we also realize that something like this and trying to change it will not happen quickly. It takes time to train an auditor and get them up to snuff to know how to do what it is they're supposed to do, unfortunately. I don't see things lightening up real soon, and that's frustrating to me. One of the most frustrating things I think as a legislator I've ever had to deal with. But we'll have a number of bills pushing on the department in the governor's office to change things as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, next we have Jennifer. It's a live question. She says, I would really like to know about Bill 5323. As a single parent and state worker, I am offended that after having no cost of living raises in 2020, and then that this bill would freeze salaries for another 2 years while all of our costs continue to go up. And then the insult to injury is the requirement of a mandatory unpaid furlough day every single month. How are state workers supposed to not fall behind?
Well, thank you for your service, Jennifer, and for the question. This is what the collective bargaining agreements decided. I don't know what union you belong to, but the state workers belong to various collective bargaining units, and they bargain every 2 years, as you know, with the governor's office. And this year, in the height of the pandemic and the economic downturn, the agreement with the governor was for state workers to not take a pay raise and for the furlough days. It's actually hard for the legislature to then change collective bargaining agreements. Generally, we just say yes or no to them. The furlough days is something that we are able to look at, however, and I know as in our budget work in the Senate, and I'm sure the House will do the same, we are taking a hard look at whether we can possibly, I'm not promising, but whether we can buy back those furlough dates for state workers. But again, this was collectively bargained. It's not generally the legislature's place to intervene with those bargaining agreements.
All right, thank you. Next we have Tom, and the first thing he says is thank you for your service. So that's nice. I know that in the legislature, Senator Robinson worked on holding the Boeing company accountable for the $8 billion state tax breaks and keeping jobs in the state of Washington. How can we reconcile the company moving 787 jobs to Charleston? Thank you.
I think that's this representative sells that 787 jobs for that. As you know, we repealed that particular provision, and the company has continued to move jobs out of the state. They were moving them whether we had it or not. There was nothing in them that said they couldn't move that particular line of those jobs. And I think during the time when we were trying to get things passed, we were trying to pin that down, and we're never able to do that. I think it's unfortunate. We are going to grow back on 737 type jobs and some of the MAX jobs up in this area. That's helpful, but the company has the right to move, unfortunately, I guess, if we want to look at it that way, anywhere they want, if they feel like they can do it. And they picked Charleston, South Carolina for any number of reasons.
I'd also like to add just how much I think we've all learned from that process. And right now I'm working on a bill with the cities of Marysville and Arlington and Snohomish County on a manufacturing industrial center. And a lot of people know about that space. And, I'm thinking about when we were bringing businesses in and offering incentives and opportunities, I really put a lot in the bill to strengthen it as far as, some union language in there, making sure that we increase the wages of the jobs, and then putting in what we're calling snapback language to make sure that we're keeping those businesses accountable and monitoring that so that we're having that expected intent. So I learned a lot from that. I wasn't there when this happened, but I think, we're going to need to continue to bolster our manufacturing and making sure that we have jobs in here, and then making sure that we're, again, holding people and holding these businesses accountable and learning from that. So I do really appreciate what Representative Sells did and what Senator Robinson did in holding them accountable, and going to continue to grow from that. So I appreciate Sells.
We did hold them accountable, and I would agree with Representative Wicks. We've had some even slightly after the main one where we structured them so that there was more accountability around job production. Those things had to be in there. So we did learn something from that.
Okay. So next we have several questions about the same issue. So I'm just going to eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Here we go. Doug asks, what bill do you think will be most impactful for families and individuals without shelters here in the 38th?
I don't think it'll be a bill. I think it'll be funding out of the Capital Budget Committee for housing projects that will help getting homeless people into housing so that they can get services. There's a housing trust fund where we'll try to increase the money so cities and counties have some access to funds that will help build those things. That will probably be the best thing we can do for the homeless. Is that the question? I think I've got that. You dropped another question on me here.
Yes, it's for people who are living without shelter.
Yeah.
And the other fortunate thing right now is we have significant federal dollars coming in through the various relief packages coming out of Congress. So we are sending money out for shelter, for rental assistance, which I know if you're already living without shelter, rental assistance isn't what you need. But we are very worried about the many people who are way behind on their rent because they've lost jobs and are unable to pay rent. And then when the eviction moratorium goes away, there could be a huge influx of new homeless people. So the rental assistance is trying to prevent folks who currently have a home from becoming homeless. So it is mostly a funding issue for shelters, for short-term shelters, for long-term housing, and then the operating needs of those housing projects or housing units once they come online. So we're working on all of that through the budget process. But I will say that sort of in the housing space this year, one of our biggest concerns is around the need for rental assistance, as I just described, to make sure that we don't see a sudden huge increase in homelessness as people lose the housing that they have.
Okay. Next question is from Timothy. Shouldn't the state be doing something extra to support our first responders and frontline healthcare workers who have fought so hard to maintain Washingtonians' health and lives during the pandemic?
I'll jump in. Yes. Thank you, Timothy. And we'll just echo that $2.2 billion in federal money that we're putting to good use, and that more is coming. This is for struggling renters, family-run and neighborhood businesses, our school districts, uninsured individuals, and our Black and Brown communities, which have been disproportionately hurt during the pandemic. And many of those individuals are essential employees and are working in those areas and need this help. And so, future action is going to be needed through all the bills that we're working on. And we're going to need to invest in these small businesses to make sure we keep those jobs. boosting public health, and keeping people in their homes and fed. Our plan puts $362 million into, as June Robinson said, rental assistance, foreclosure assistance, and supporting small landlords to stay on top of their mortgages, and $49 million to food and emergency cash programs. So we should be doing more, and we welcome additional ideas for stepping up and stepping in to do that. And as we continue to get money from the federal government and identify ways to support people with our state dollars, and provide some local flexibility for them to help, we're going to keep doing that.
Okay. Next, we have a question that we got from Jesse via email. What can we do to help all the kids who are not keeping up in their online classes? And Jesse adds, thanks for all that you do.
Well, the first thing we can do is get the schools back open. And to do that, make sure that our teachers are vaccinated, have the proper protective equipment, and we can get things going again. That's the best thing we can do, other than making sure that there's adult supervision around at all times, which is difficult to do because people have to work.
And there's a new phrase that this year called learning loss, which I think is pretty intuitive what that means. I would say it's kind of ill-defined, but I think we all get the idea that this year of virtual school is not going to be as productive for learning as in-person classroom instruction. So I think we're going to be allocating funding again to our school districts and ask them to come up with a plan for how they might address this learning loss, either over the summer. It could be through the school districts, or it could be through community-based organizations, or next fall when hopefully we can get kids back in school. So there's definitely a lot of concern about both the mental health, behavioral health issues facing our kids. It's just a really challenging time for kids in many ways. And so we're really thinking a lot about how we can boost our schools' resources around addressing the mental health needs as well as the learning needs to bring them back.
Hey, we have about 15 minutes left, so let's hurry up and do this. Stephen sent us an email. He says, I have heard that substance use has increased during the pandemic. What are you doing to address substance use disorder and all the problems that go along with that?
I want to thank you for that question, Stephen. And, I'm looking to one of our great state representatives, Lauren Davis, who has dropped a bill about removing healthcare coverage barriers to accessing substance use disorder treatment services. So that's going to be huge, along with investing money into these community-based organizations, helping people get connected, jumping in and being upstream when we're helping people and getting people into housing first policies to then help get people the wraparound services that they need. So those are just some of the things that I'm seeing come through and that I'm very supportive of. I'd welcome, I don't know if Senator Robinson has some stuff they're working on in the Senate that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, although it certainly is an issue that we continue to try to address both through policy, making services more accessible for people, as well as through funding to make sure that there are services available when people need them.
Okay. Next one is a live question from Elizabeth. Washington's background check system helps ensure firearms do not make it into dangerous hands. What are you doing to address access to high-capacity magazines and other accessories that make semi-automatic weapons more deadly?
Representative Salas, do you want to talk about that?
I haven't looked at the gun legislation. I am aware of some legislation banning certain kinds of weapons from Capitol campuses after what's happened, but I'm not aware of any particular gun legislation around magazines that has come up this session. That doesn't mean it's not there. It may mean I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I think there are some bills related to this. I don't want to speak out of turn, but Representative Valdez has dropped something related to that. But I know this issue is being discussed and is something that we need to address. You know, I attended Marysville Pilchuck High School where we had a shooting and, you know, making sure that these are in responsible gun owners' hands is really, really critical.
Okay. We have an email from Tobias who asks, how are we improving access to childcare? Working parents are having a hard time this pandemic.
One of the biggest issues in our childcare system, if you want to call it that, is the workforce. We pay our childcare providers very poorly, generally, and so that makes keeping a steady workforce challenging because it's hard work, it's stressful work, and people are generally not paid very well to do it, and so they tend to leave and find other jobs. So as part of the kind of looking systemically at childcare and early learning, we definitely need to address pay for our childcare workers. And one way we can do that is the state does subsidize childcare for the lowest income workers in our state. And so right now we don't pay the full amount for that subsidy. And so that puts those childcare providers, kind of sets them back. It doesn't provide them really with the funding that they need in order to provide that service. So again, another thing we're looking at through the budget is increasing the rate the state pays for subsidized childcare, which then just kind of puts more money into the system and helps them pay staff more. We also want to make sure that we can increase the subsidies for parents who are working hard. And I mean, childcare is just as expensive as college right now. And you don't have a chance to save for it like you might have at least a chance to save a little bit for your kids' college. So it's a real need. There are some bills. I know there's a House bill and a Senate bill called the Fair Start Act. It's a very comprehensive policy look at how we need to do better in our state for childcare and early learning.
Thank you, Senator Robinson. I just want to echo that too. You know, like as she said, we don't have enough childcare locations, and it's expensive for the providers to run their centers, and for the families that need it to afford it. Families of all income levels, and you know, currently caregiving, like she said, is not an industry that people go into for the money. There's a lot of important safety and educational requirements. You know, child-adult ratios that need to be met, and that's really important to keeping our children safe. And I believe that our lack of an investment in childcare and giving the respect the industry that it deserves is really hurting our economy. It's leaving mostly women, unfortunately, out of the workforce. And because of that lack of investment, we are leaving billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in personal earnings, business output, and gross product out of the state of Washington. And so I was really proud to move the Fair Start for Kids Act forward, as Senator Robinson had mentioned, because it'll address all of those areas, creating additional spaces, improving training and access for current and aspiring child care workers, more opportunities for our providers, the right kind of subsidies that honor the work, and you know, no one should have to choose between bringing home the bacon and bread to their families or living in poverty. So we all know it takes a village to raise a child, and that no parent does it alone. And so this is going to be a really critical piece of legislation that I'm proud to support, and looking forward to your support as well.
Okay, next we have another live question. This one is from Crizo. And the question is, how are you supporting small and local businesses that are not going to qualify for the federal grants because the loss of their revenue will not reflect until next year? What is the state looking at doing to support?
When you're talking about the federal grants, are you talking about the CARES? I assume she may be talking about things coming through the Department of Commerce, the CARES Act.
Not sure. It doesn't clarify.
Right.
Probably.
One of the things we did do with the Employment Security Department was make sure that some of those unemployment rates wouldn't skyrocket overnight. That was passed in this last bill. There's still going to be some rate increases over time, but we've spread them out so that the businesses, when they get back up and running, they're not hit by rate increases on unemployment insurance so hard. That's one of the things that we have done.
Yeah, and we've also worked on, early on, we passed a bill sponsored by Representative Wallen that would remove B&O taxes from having to pay that back when you've received those grants. So it's a little bit different, but we're looking at different opportunities as well. On the Commerce and Gaming Committee, I deal a lot with our bars and restaurants who have been really hit hard. So we're looking at ways to reduce license fees and pull them out a little longer, extend those. Lots of different options that we're trying to address there. And so I think every committee is working within their bounds to be able to support businesses and provide relief in big and small ways. Because I know, even if it's, the license is a little bit, just not having to pay that can make a really big difference when margins are really small for some of our businesses. And I'm looking forward to other ways to do that. I've been talking to a number of different legislators on our options. And one of the other things is, when we have to be really careful about not gifting of public funds to businesses, but we can use our federal dollars to be able to help them. But often the federal dollars have restrictions or guardrails around how we're using it for good reason. So we're not really sure what the next stimulus might look like. So that will kind of determine what we're able to do as well. But we welcome, I know all of us welcome your ideas.
Okay. First, a clarification. Jennifer, remember, state worker for Lowe's, she wants to clarify that professional staff organization at the UW does not have a union. So she just wanted you to know that. Okay.
Yes, I've been reading the comments and I did see that. And it is true, obviously Jennifer knows that the higher ed staff did sort of get pulled into the universe of state employees. And as I said, we are looking at whether we can buy back those furlough days for all state workers.
I think we're also looking at the college and workforce development area, how we balance some of those things out regarding college and professional employees.
Okay. I think we have room for one or two more questions. So let's see. First, we have Colin, who is asking, what are you doing to fight climate change?
I think there's a lot of great pieces of legislation coming through, including our transportation package, which has a a carbon fee attached to it. And then we're also doing the Clean Fuel Standards bill as well. That's moving. So those are a number of ways. I think, the fish passages are critical for that as well. And I recently signed on to the Washington Strong Act, which will take investments and put that into addressing all of these great projects that have a green piece to it. And so I'm hoping that that can move forward and make a meaningful difference, because, we have things like in the Marysville School District, for instance, when I worked there, I put solar panels on top of Marysville-Pilchuck High School, or worked on that project. And when I was doing it, I looked at the PUD information, and Marysville-Pilchuck was paying Marysville-Getchell, the other high school, which was newer, was paying a fourth of what Marysville-Pilchuck was. And so, this isn't just smart, for our environment. It's economically smart too, if that's the thing that drives you. So these are going to be really important investments. I know at some of our elementary schools, we have boilers that are so old you can't even find parts for them, and you have to go on eBay. So really, updating our systems and projects and creating that green investment is going to be really important. So I think those are some really critical pieces of legislation that I'm happy to be supporting. Thanks for that question. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in.
We're going to go with our last question, but before that, we have a couple of comments that I do want to read. Joe says, Representative Emily Wicks is an angel.
Thank you, Joe.
And Timothy says, thank you for taking the time to meet with us and address the questions of constituents. This is very encouraging for us. And last question is from Rachel via email. And Rachel asks, what are you doing to make sure people can get good paying jobs when they get back into the workforce?
Well, hopefully we can get them back into the workforce, many of them into the good paying jobs they already had. So that's part and parcel of trying to get through this COVID-19 process. The other part of it is providing the kind of training and workforce development opportunities for folks with the bills that we passed through the legislature that help them get that kind of training so they don't have to pay huge amounts for it. We have a great community college system that can help them get through that. But that's what it's going to take, is to have people get the kind of retraining they're going to need to get the kind of jobs that will sustain themselves and their families. It's not going to be something done overnight or simple, or just because you had a particular job at one point, that job will be there when you get back. But we're going to work as hard as we can to provide opportunities for you to get the kind of training you need or the jobs that you can find. The other part of it is, if you're in the construction trades, the amounts of money that we invest in transportation, capital budget, means lots of good paying jobs for folks.
All right. So it looks like we are pretty much out of time. We have time for your closing remarks. And I just wanted to, for people who maybe joined late, maybe you can address the vaccine issue just one last time before you go.
Well, I mean, as I've said many times, unfortunately, it's going to require a little bit of patience, which nobody has. We're all tired and want to get back to where we were, as you know, all of us do as well. The problem with vaccines is largely a supply issue. As I said earlier, we are trying to vaccinate the entire country and the entire world all at the same time, and we just don't have a regular, reliable supply yet in order to be able to really do that. But I am confident that, you know, in the next months ahead, we will get better. And the infrastructure, the Snohomish County has done a good job of setting up drive-through vaccination sites, and our provider's office, our pharmacies are all ready to go. We just need the vaccines in order to do that. So stay tuned, stay in touch with the Snohomish Health District. They have a call line as well as an online platform where you can follow, you know, when vaccine is available. I know it's not enough. I know people are frustrated. We're doing what we can at all levels of government, federal, state, and local, to roll out the vaccines as soon as we can. The other thing I want to say is many people are very hesitant to take the vaccine. So if you have friends and family members who you know are thinking that they don't want to have the vaccine, I would just encourage you to encourage them to think again about it and maybe take another look, because the more people we can get vaccinated over the next few months, the quicker we will be able to open our restaurants and be outside and go to concerts and do all those things that we're just all so desperately wanting to do.
All right, let's go to closing remarks, folks.
I would simply, there was one question we didn't get to respond to, which I thought was rather interesting, around the public schools and people move to homeschooling. I would bet after this COVID-19 is over, you're going to see a kind of amalgam of those kinds of things going on. The homeschooling from a distance, working with school districts, which they already do to a certain extent. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some kind of mixture of that. We are not going to go back to a same normal that we had before. We're going to have to plan a lot better for an abnormal like we're facing now. The Employment Security Department is just one example of that, but every agency in the state, private and public, has been impacted and has been frustrated by not being able to deliver services as fast as they can. It will take some patience and it will take some time.
I just want to just say how much I appreciate the comments from Senator Robinson and Representative Sells, and just the conversation that everyone has been adding to the chat. I really appreciate hearing from everyone and having this dialogue. It's been really interesting working from my home office in Everett. It almost feels like I am in Olympia, just not going outside. But I miss everyone, and I do enjoy that on the weekends I get to go out and experience the community, and I want to do more of that. That's what I've missed this whole time, this whole year during the campaign and during session. But I'm glad that my money and my dollars can go here to support local businesses during this time, and just want to express my appreciation to everyone who took the time to listen to this. And I know I hear from a lot of you via email and phone, and it just warms my heart and makes me so happy to hear your advocacy. And yeah, I continue to, on the weekends, work at Providence doing attestation, and there's lots of opportunities to sign up for the Medical Reserve Corps. I want to put a plug in for that. I know I saw some comments on here about helping the Department of Health and the Snohomish County Department of Health on these things. They're always looking for people, and so if you want to get in contact and you have some volunteer capacity, please let me know, because they are looking and need all the help they can get. Thank you. I really just appreciate this opportunity and connecting with everyone in this way.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Good night. Thank you for joining us.
Good night.